It claims that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has been killed in an Israeli attack. But what if I told you that this is not the full story? The real truth is far more complex, and the surprising part is that almost no one is aware of it. But before we go any further, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because here you'll discover things you won't find anywhere. There is a reality that many people still do not fully understand. For years, the forces that once protected the Iranian Revolution have slowly been losing their grip on parts of society. Much of what has happened behind the scenes has never been fully revealed to the public. Many events remain hidden, buried beneath layers of political messaging, propaganda, and fear. But one thing became impossible to ignore. Mass protests inside Iran began to grow. These were not small demonstrations or isolated incidents. They were large, powerful, emotional gatherings of people expressing anger, frustration, and exhaustion with the system. The protests were not only significant because they existed. What worried the Iranian leadership even more was the speed at which they gained momentum. Movements like these rarely explode overnight. Usually unrest builds slowly. But in this case, the protests spread rapidly from city to city. The momentum itself became the real threat. For the Iranian leadership, this was deeply alarming, because momentum means something powerful. It means people are no longer afraid. And when fear disappears, control becomes difficult. At the same time, Iranian intelligence agencies were warning the leadership that something much bigger might be happening behind the scenes. According to many analysts and intelligence reports over the past 2 decades, foreign intelligence networks have been slowly building influence inside Iran. Among the names often mentioned in these discussions is Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad. For more than 20 years, intelligence experts believe that Mossad has worked patiently to build one of the most sophisticated spy networks targeting Iran. Their operations reportedly included cyber warfare, sabotage missions, covert assassinations of nuclear scientists, and recruitment of insiders. This was not a short-term operation. It was a long game. And if those reports are accurate, it means that by the time protests erupted across Iran, foreign intelligence services already had deep knowledge of the country's internal weaknesses. From the perspective of Iranian leadership, this created a dangerous situation. Internal unrest, external intelligence pressure, and a population that seemed increasingly divided. Some analysts believe a carefully coordinated strategy was unfolding. Not necessarily a single operation, but a series of pressure points designed to destabilize the system from multiple directions. Economic sanctions weakened the economy, cyber attacks targeted infrastructure, political narratives spread across international media. And inside the country, frustration continued to grow. For Iranian leadership, this combination was extremely dangerous, because history shows that revolutions do not collapse only from outside pressure. They collapse when outside pressure meets internal division. And in Iran, both were present. Yet despite these challenges, the Iranian state did not collapse. In fact, the government managed to suppress many of the protests and maintain control of key institutions. Intelligence agencies arrested individuals accused of espionage and sabotage. Security forces regained control of several cities where demonstrations had grown intense. From the outside, it looked as if the system had survived another crisis. But surviving a crisis does not mean the damage disappears. Sometimes a system survives, but cracks remain beneath the surface, and those cracks can grow over time. Many observers believe that this period marked one of the most serious internal challenges Iran had faced since the early years of the revolution, because this time the challenge was not only political, it was generational. Younger Iranians were growing up in a world very different from the one their parents experienced in 1979 during the Iranian Revolution. Their expectations were different. Their access to information was wider. Through the internet and social media, they could see how people lived in other countries. The revolutionary generation believed they were defending the legacy of a historic movement that overthrew a monarchy and resisted foreign domination. But many younger citizens were asking a different question. What kind of future does this system offer us? This question became one of the most dangerous political forces inside the country. Because when a generation begins to doubt the future promised by its leaders, the legitimacy of the system begins to weaken. Iran's leadership was aware of this risk. They understood that maintaining authority was no longer just about military power or security forces. It also required maintaining belief in the revolutionary narrative that had defined the country for more than 4 decades. If that belief faded, the entire structure could become vulnerable. This is why many analysts believe that Iran's leadership began thinking not only about political control, but also about symbolism. Symbols are powerful in political history. Sometimes a single event can reshape how millions of people view their country, their leaders, and their future. History offers many examples of this. In some cases, leaders become symbols of resistance. In others, they become symbols of sacrifice. And occasionally, a moment emerges where the personal fate of a leader becomes tied to the survival of a political movement. Some observers believe that Iran may have reached such a moment. There are arguments suggesting that the leadership understood the seriousness of the internal crisis. They knew the country was under immense pressure from sanctions, intelligence operations, and internal dissatisfaction. They also knew that losing the support of the population could be catastrophic. In moments like these, leaders often face extremely difficult choices. They must decide whether to compromise, reform, or double down on their existing path. Iran's leadership chose resistance. They chose to project strength, and they continued to frame the situation as a struggle between national sovereignty and foreign interference. This narrative has been a central pillar of Iranian political messaging for decades. It presents Iran as a country constantly targeted by powerful external forces attempting to weaken it. For many Iranians, this message still resonates strongly, especially when considering the long history of foreign involvement in the region. From colonial influence in the early 20th century to the 1953 coup that overthrew Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh to decades of geopolitical rivalry in the Middle East, the memory of outside interference remains deeply embedded in the national consciousness. Because of this history, Iranian leaders often emphasize unity in the face of external pressure. They argue that internal division only benefits foreign powers. Whether people agree with this argument or not, it remains a powerful political tool. And in times of crisis, political tools become even more important. The leadership understands that maintaining control is not only about force, it is about narrative. If people believe the country is under attack, they are more likely to rally around the state. If people believe the system is collapsing internally, they are more likely to challenge it. This battle over perception is one of the most important elements of modern geopolitics. In the age of information warfare, controlling the narrative can be as important as controlling territory. Iran, Israel, the United States, and many other nations are deeply engaged in this invisible conflict. Cyber operations, psychological warfare, information campaigns, these tools shape how populations interpret events, and sometimes they shape history itself, historical perspective. When historians look at moments of political crisis, they often notice a pattern repeating across different countries and different eras. Political systems rarely collapse suddenly without warning. Instead, they experience long periods of tension where pressure builds gradually. The French Revolution did not appear overnight. The Soviet Union did not collapse in a single day. Even the fall of monarchies and empires often followed decades of internal stress before reaching a breaking point. What makes Iran's situation particularly complex is that the country sits at the center of one of the most volatile regions in the world. It faces geopolitical rivalry, economic sanctions, regional conflicts, and internal political debates all at the same time. Despite these pressures, the Islamic Republic of Iran has survived for more than 4 decades. That alone makes it one of the more durable revolutionary governments in modern history. Whether it continues to survive in its current form is a question that analysts, historians, and political scientists continue to debate. Because history teaches us something important. Every political system eventually faces a moment where it must adapt, reform, or confront the consequences of change. And when those moments arrive, the decisions made by leaders can shape the future of a nation for generations. The shadow war few people see. While street protests and political speeches dominate headlines, a different kind of conflict often unfolds quietly in the background. This conflict is rarely visible to the public. It does not involve tanks rolling across borders or fighter jets dominating the sky. Instead, it takes place in computer networks, intelligence files, secret meetings, and carefully planned operations carried out far from cameras. For Iran, this shadow war has been part of daily reality for decades. Since the early 2000s, tensions between Iran and several Western countries have revolved around one central issue: Iran's nuclear program. Iranian leaders insist that their nuclear activities are meant for peaceful purposes such as energy production and scientific research. However, many Western governments and Israel have long suspected that Iran could eventually seek nuclear weapons capability. This disagreement triggered a long chain of international actions. Economic sanctions were imposed. Diplomatic negotiations began. Covert intelligence operations intensified. One of the most famous examples of this hidden conflict occurred in 2010 with the discovery of Stuxnet, a highly sophisticated computer virus that targeted Iranian nuclear facilities. It was unlike any cyber weapon the world had seen before. Designed to sabotage centrifuges used in uranium enrichment, the virus quietly caused machines to malfunction while sending normal readings back to operators. For months, the sabotage remained undetected. By the time it was discovered, significant damage had already been done. Cybersecurity experts later concluded that Stuxnet was likely created through cooperation between advanced intelligence agencies. Although no government officially admitted responsibility, many analysts believe it was developed by the United States and Israel as part of a covert effort to slow Iran's nuclear progress. The incident revealed something important. Modern conflict was changing. Nations were now capable of attacking each other without firing a single bullet. For Iran, Stuxnet was a warning that the battlefield had expanded far beyond traditional warfare, but cyber operations were not the only part of the shadow war. Between 2010 and 2020, several Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated in mysterious attacks. In some cases, explosives attached to motorcycles were used. In others, sophisticated remote-controlled weapons were reportedly deployed. These incidents shocked the Iranian scientific community. They also reinforced the belief among Iranian leaders that powerful intelligence networks were operating inside the country. From Tehran's perspective, these operations were not isolated events. They were part of a coordinated effort to weaken Iran's technological development and intimidate its scientific community. In response, Iran significantly strengthened its internal security apparatus. Intelligence agencies increased surveillance, and counterintelligence operations expanded to identify possible infiltrators. But intelligence wars are rarely simple. For every spy that is captured, another may still be operating quietly in the background. This uncertainty creates a permanent atmosphere of suspicion within any government facing such threats. And in Iran's case, it added another layer of tension on top of existing economic and political pressures, economic pressure in the sanctions era. While intelligence operations created security concerns, economic sanctions created a different kind of pressure. For ordinary Iranians, sanctions often became the most visible impact of international tensions. Over the years, restrictions on banking, oil exports, and international trade severely affected Iran's economy. Inflation increased, the national currency lost value, and everyday goods became more expensive. For many citizens, daily life became increasingly difficult. Young people struggled to find stable employment. Businesses faced restrictions on international transactions, and many families watched their savings lose purchasing power. These economic challenges fueled frustration inside the country. While some citizens blamed foreign sanctions for the crisis, others questioned the government's economic policies and its ability to manage the situation. The debate over responsibility became one of the central political discussions inside Iran. Supporters of the government argued that the country was under economic warfare imposed by powerful international actors. Critics argued that internal reforms and policy changes were necessary to improve living conditions. Both arguments gained supporters, and this division reflected a deeper struggle about Iran's future direction. Should the country maintain a confrontational stance toward Western powers, or should it pursue greater international integration and economic cooperation? Part 2, Section 3, The Power of Internal Narratives. Inside Iran, political leaders continued emphasizing the importance of national resilience. They framed the country's challenges as part of a broader historical struggle for independence and sovereignty. This message has deep roots in Iranian history. Many Iranians remember periods when foreign powers played major roles in shaping the country's politics and economy. From British and Russian influence in the early 20th century to Cold War interventions, these historical experiences created a strong sensitivity to external interference. As a result, political narratives that emphasize national independence often resonate strongly with parts of the population. However, modern societies are rarely united by a single perspective. Different generations, social groups, and economic classes often interpret events differently. Some citizens prioritize stability and resistance to foreign pressure. Others prioritize economic reform and greater global integration. These competing visions of the future create an ongoing political conversation within the country. And like many nations facing rapid change, Iran continues to navigate this internal debate. Lessons from history. When historians analyze situations like this, they often look for parallels in other countries. History shows that nations experiencing intense external pressure and internal debate often face critical turning points. For example, during the Cold War, many countries found themselves caught between global rivalries while also dealing with domestic political struggles. In Eastern Europe, economic hardship and political dissatisfaction eventually led to major transformations in the late 1980s. In the Middle East, the Arab Spring uprisings of 2011 demonstrated how quickly public frustration could erupt into nationwide movements. Yet history also shows that outcomes vary widely. Some governments collapse, others reform and adapt, and some survive prolonged crises by maintaining strong security institutions and loyal support bases. Iran's political system has proven remarkably resilient over the past 4 decades. Despite wars, sanctions, protests, and international isolation, it has remained in power. This resilience suggests that the country's political structure has deeper roots than many outside observers initially expected. However, resilience does not mean stability is guaranteed forever. Every political system evolves over time. New generations emerge, economic conditions change, and global power dynamics shift. These forces gradually reshape nations in ways that can be difficult to predict. The future remains unwritten today. Iran continues to stand at a complex crossroads. It remains a regional power with significant influence across the Middle East. Its political system continues to face both internal debates and external pressure. At the same time, the country possesses a highly educated population, a long historical tradition, and vast natural resources. These factors give Iran the potential for multiple possible futures. Some analysts believe the country could eventually pursue economic reforms and international engagement. Others believe geopolitical rivalries will keep tensions high for years to come. Still others argue that internal generational change will slowly transform the political landscape from within. History reminds us that predicting the future of any nation is extremely difficult. Events that seem impossible today sometimes become reality within a few years. Unexpected crises can reshape political systems. New leaders can introduce unexpected reforms. And societies can change in ways that even experts fail to anticipate. What is certain, however, is that Iran will continue to play an important role in global geopolitics. Its strategic location, cultural heritage, and political influence ensure that developments inside the country will remain closely watched around the world. For historians and observers alike, the story of Iran is far from finished. In many ways, it may only be entering its next chapter.